Hi guys, Miss Davis, back for day 13 of the Anne Frank series. So I'm going to jump right into things today. I got a little bit of space I want to cover in the time we have together today, so I'm going to read as much as I can in the time that we've got. I've skipped ahead a few chapters, all the way up through Monday, August 23rd, 1943. I've skipped a few journal entries. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to get to this place where, again, all the entries that we have selected for the day kind of run together under a common theme. And so the common theme I really picked up from the entries I'm going to read today is that, oh my gosh, they're sick of each other, sick of being in hiding, sick of being on top of one another, sick of the deteriorating conditions. And the more I hear about, the end of the COVID-19 quarantine being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and the longer and longer and longer this thing seems to be pushed out for, the more I really sort of can understand how the Franks and the Van Dans are just feeling like a little stir crazy, I guess, for lack of a better word. So that's what's going through all the journal entries I've got picked for the day, so let's jump right into it. Monday, August 23rd, 1943. Dear Kitty, continuation of the secret annex daily timetable. As the clock strikes 8:30 in the morning, Margot and Mummy are jittery. Shh, Daddy, quiet, Otto. Shh, Pim. It's 8:30. Come back here. You can't run any more water. Walk quietly. These are the various cries to Daddy in the bathroom. As the clock strikes 8:30, he has to be in the living room. Not a drop of water, no lavatory, no walking about, everything quiet. As long as none of the office staff are there, everything can be heard in the warehouse. The door is opened upstairs at 20 minutes past 8, and shortly after there are 3 taps on the floor. Anne's porridge. I climb upstairs and fetch my puppy dog plate. Down in my room again, everything goes at terrific speed. Do my hair, put away my noisy tin potty, bed in place. Hush, the clock strikes. Upstairs, Mrs. Van Daan has changed her shoes and is shuffling about in bedroom slippers. Mr. Van Daan, too, is all quiet. Now we have a little bit of real family life. I want to read or work. Margot as well. Also Daddy and Mummy. Daddy is sitting, with Dickens and the dictionary, naturally, on the edge of the sagging, squeaky bed, where there aren't even any decent mattresses. 2 bolsters on top of each other will also serve the purpose. Then he thinks, mustn't have them. Then I'll manage without. Once he is reading, he doesn't look up or about him. He laughs every now and then. Takes awful trouble to get Mummy interested in the little story. Answer, I haven't got time now. Looks disappointed for just a second, then reads on again. A little later, when he comes to something extra amusing, he tries it again. Oh, you must read this, Mummy. Mummy sits on the oak lap bed, reads, sews, knits, or works, whatever she feels like. She suddenly thinks of something. Just says it quickly. And do you know? Margot, just jot down. And after a while, peace returns once more. Margot closes her book with a clap. Daddy raises his eyebrows into a funny curve. His reading wrinkle deepens again, he is lost in his book once more. Mummy begins to chatter with Margot. I become curious and listen too. Pim is drawn into the discussion. 9 o'clock. Breakfast. So again, just going over their little daily, or sorry, yours, Anne. Going over their little daily things that they have to do, things that they amuse themselves with while they must remain still and quiet and not make any noise and not run any water and not do anything. Again, maybe it's just because it's me, I'm really sort of enamored with the idea of Daddy reading Charles Dickens and how much books are an ever-present part of their life in hiding. And as I asked yesterday, 3 things really sustain them: the news cycle and the things they are learning and the things they are reading. So once again, I'm going to ask you, what are you reading? What is keeping your mind occupied during this time? Reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. So I think that was Ralph Waldo Emerson or something like that. So basically, if you read, it's the best thing you can do for yourself to keep your mind sharp and to keep learning everything all the time. So I'm encouraged that Daddy's reading, and I think we all should be. Next entry, Friday, September 10th, 1943. Dear Kitty, every time I write to you, something special seems to have happened, that they are more often unpleasant than pleasant things. However, now there is something wonderful going on. Last Wednesday evening, the 8th of September, we sat around listening to the 7 o'clock news, and the first thing we heard was, "Here follows the best news of the whole war. Italy has capitulated." Italy's non-conditional surrender. The Dutch program from England began at 8:15. Listeners, an hour ago I had just finished writing the chronicle of the day when the wonderful news of Italy's capitulation came in. I can tell you that I have never deposited my notes in the wastepaper basket with such joy. God save the King! The American national anthem and the Internationale were played. As always, the Dutch program was uplifting, but not too optimistic. Still, we have troubles too. It's about Mr. Kupius. As you know, we are all very fond of him. He is always cheerful and amazingly brave, although he is never well, has a lot of pain, and is not allowed to eat much or to do much walking. When Mr. Kufius enters, the sun begins to shine, Mummy said just recently, and she is quite right. Now he has had to go to the hospital for a very unpleasant abdominal operation and will have to stay there for at least 4 weeks. You really ought to have seen how he said goodbye to us, just as usual. He might have simply been going out to do a bit of shopping. Yours, Anne. So again, 4 weeks is a long time, and since Kufi is such a big part of their lives, everything is so uncertain. Makes me, put into perspective things of the particular quarantine situation that we're in right now. I wouldn't want to send one of my loved ones to hospital right now, and I'm sure that the hospital conditions in Holland during the pinnacle of the war are not a lot better, so that makes me worried for Mr. Kufius a little bit, and worried about what would happen to the Frank family if he didn't come back. Next entry, Thursday, September 16th, 1943. Dear Kitty, relations between us here are getting worse all the time. At meal times, no one dares to open their mouths except to allow a mouthful of food to slip in, because whatever is said, you either annoy someone or it is misunderstood. I swallow valerian pills every day against worry and depression, but it doesn't prevent me from being even more miserable the next day. A good hearty laugh would help me more than 10 valerian pills, but we've almost forgotten how to laugh. I feel afraid sometimes at having to be so serious I'll grow a long face and my mouth will droop at the corners. The others don't get any better either. Everyone looks with fear and misgivings toward the great terror, winter. Another thing that does not cheer us up is the fact that the warehouse man, VM, is becoming suspicious about the secret annex. We really wouldn't mind what VM thought of the situation if he wasn't so exceptionally inquisitive, difficult to fob off, and moreover not to be trusted. One day Kraler wanted to be extra careful, put on his coat at 10 minutes to 1, and went to the chemist around the corner. He was back in less than 5 minutes and sneaked up like a thief, up the steep stairs that led straight to us. At 1:15 he wanted to go again, but Eli came to warn him that VM was in the office. He did a right-about turn and sat with us until 1:30. Then he took off his shoes and went in stockinged feet to the front attic door, went downstairs step by step, and after balancing there for a quarter of an hour to avoid creaking, he landed safely in the office, having entered from the outside. Eli has been freed of VM in the meantime and came up to fetch Kraler, but he had already been gone a long time. He was still on the staircase with his shoes off. Whatever would the people in the street have thought if they had seen the manager putting on his shoes outside? Gosh, the manager in his socks. Yours, Anne. Excuse me. And so, again, the great lengths that they must go to keep hidden, the idea that they are really in quite a bit of peril, even though they have the idea that they are safely secreted away in the middle of this war-torn place. In the previous journal entry, I totally forgot with Mr. Kufius to even talk about the fact that, Italy's giving in and falling to the Allied forces is great news as far as the end of the war is concerned. It's a cause for celebration, but then right back to everyday dangers, everyday perils, the day-to-day things kind of keep that good news from affecting them awfully much. Next journal entry, Saturday, October 17th, 1943. Dear Kitty, Kufius is back again, thank goodness. He still looks rather pale, but in spite of this, he sets out cheerfully to sell clothes for Van Daan. It's an unpleasant fact that the Van Dans have run out of money. Mrs. Van Dan won't part with a thing from her pile of clothes, dresses, and shoes. Mr. Van Dan's suit isn't easily disposed of because he wants too much for it. The end of the story is not yet in sight. Mrs. Van Dan will certainly have to part with her fur coat. They have a terrible row upstairs about it, and now the reconciliation period of "Oh, darling Pooty" and "Precious Curly" has set in. I'm dazed by all the abusive exchanges that have taken place in this virtuous house during the past month. Daddy goes about with his lips tightly pursed when anyone speaks to him. He looks up startled, as if he's afraid he will have to patch up some tricky relationship again. Mummy has red patches on her cheeks from excitement. Margot complains of headaches. Dussel can't sleep. Mrs. Van Dan grouses the whole day, and I'm going completely crazy. Quite honestly, I sometimes forget who we are quarreling with and with whom we've made up. The only way to take one's mind off it all is to study. And I do a lot of that. Yours, Anne. Well, that's a blessing. At least there's that to do. But again, being in close quarters, being on top of one another, you can see that like things are grating on their nerves, and it's hard to be in hiding for so long. And this idea that the Van Dans have run out of money and are now having to take to selling their possessions and what things they will let go and what things they will, hold on to. This is a scary thing for me. I mean, the question of, okay, so what happens when the money runs out? That's always, like a dangerous thing, like a beast at the door. Um, that's a great question. I mean, what happens when the thing that's, making it okay right for you to go to the grocery store, for you to replenish the necessities you need, this, kind of nagging doubt in the back of your mind is, okay, well, I'm okay right now, but what happens if the money runs out? So this really reminds me of the current situation in that way, because it's a worry of mine. I'm the mom, I'm the parent. I have to worry about how am I going to take care of my family if this and what if that. And reading about the Van Dans running out of money does put me somewhat on edge and makes me think. Next journal entry, Friday, October 29th, 1943. Dear Kitty, there have been resounding rows again between Mr. and Mrs. Van Dan. It came about like this. As I've already told you, the Van Dans are at the end of their money. One day, some time ago now, Kufius spoke about with a furrier with whom he was on good terms. This gave Van Dan the idea of selling his wife's fur coat. It's a fur coat made from rabbit skins, and she has worn it 17 years. He got 325 florins for it, an enormous sum. However, Mrs. Van Dan wanted to keep the money to buy new clothes after the war, and it took some doing before Mr. Van Dan made it clear to her that the money was urgently needed for the household. The yells and screams, stamping and abuse, you can't possibly imagine it. It was frightening. My family stood at the bottom of the stairs holding their breath, ready, if necessary, to drag them apart. All this shouting and weeping and nervous tension are so unsettling and such a strain that in the evening I drop into my bed crying, thanking heaven that I sometimes have half an hour to myself. Mr. Kufius is away again. His stomach gives him no peace. He doesn't even know whether it has stopped bleeding yet. For the first time he was very down when he told us he didn't feel well and was going home. All goes well with me on the whole, except that I have no appetite. I'm being told, "You don't look well at all." I must say that they are doing their best to keep me up to the mark. Grape sugar, cod liver oil, yeast tablets, and calcium have all been lined up. My nerves often get the better of me. It is especially on Sundays that I feel rotten. The atmosphere is so oppressive and sleepy and as heavy as lead. You don't hear a single bird singing outside, and a deadly close silence hangs everywhere, catching hold of me as if it will drag me down into a deep underworld. At such times Daddy, Mummy, and Margot leave me cold. I wander from room to another, downstairs and up, feeling like a songbird whose wings have been clipped and who is hurling himself in utter darkness against the bars of his cage. "Go outside, laugh, and take a breath of fresh air," a voice cries within me, but I don't even feel a response anymore. I go and lie in the divan and sleep, to make the time pass more quickly, and the stillness, and the terrible fear, because there is no way of killing them. Yours, Anne. There's not a lot to say about that, except that it's getting to her, and it's getting to them all. And that's all the time we have for the day today, so I'll see you again tomorrow.